Hello and welcome. I'm Laura Briggs with the Vegan Fitness Runner podcast, where I'll be talking all things running, health and fitness, and what it means to be an active vegan. My next guest made history when she became the first woman to ever complete the notorious Barkley Marathons with just 99 seconds to spare. Jasmin Paris, a vet, mum of two, now ranks as one of only 20 finishers of the race since 1989. Co-founder of the Green Runners, Jasmin uses her platform to advocate sustainable running, encouraging other runners to think about how they move, travel, kit up, and speak out. Jasmin Paris, you know you are responsible for a lot of people crying last month, right?
Yeah, I've heard that, yeah.
You are. You're an absolute inspiration. I, for one, lots of my friends all said watching you finish the Barkley Marathons was just such an amazing and uplifting moment to them. How did you feel?
I mean, I guess once I had time to kind of take it in and recover a bit, I felt, it was incredible. It was a fantastic feeling and a bit of relief as well, really, I guess, that I could stop and that it was over.
I suppose when you've been running for that long, there must be part of you that just kind of wants to sit down. And as some of the photos show, you pretty much collapsed, didn't you, at the end?
Yeah, because it was like that final sprint up the hill was, I just had to kind of dug deeper than I'd ever had to do before. So it was just all about trying to get back to that gate in time. Because I was aware that I had very little time. I wasn't even sure exactly how much, but I just sort of gave it everything to get there, and then collapsed.
I mean, you had 99 seconds actually to get to the gate, didn't you? How do you find that kind of extra speed when you have just been, slogging it out for so many hours? Where does that come from?
I mean, I think that just comes from really wanting it, doesn't it? Like you're faced with the possibility that all this effort will not have been enough. And yes, I've found something extra inside yourself, but I think it's just wanting it so badly, that kind of intrinsic desire to get something done, to achieve something that you've kind of set your heart on.
And was there also, I've read in interviews and seen you speaking in other interviews that part of you just did not want to have to do this again?
Yeah, I mean, looking back now, that I've had a bit of time for it to kind of, for the kind of hardest moments to fade in my memory, and then the kind of good times to kind of surface more. The way everything always does after these things, it's kind of type 2 fun. It's more fun in retrospect. So now it doesn't feel quite as kind of daunting, the idea of doing it again if you were to have to do it again. But at the time, when you've done 5 loops and you're kind of so desperate for it to all be done, then the idea at that point of having to do it again was like huge. Yeah, that was certainly. So
was it comparable? Was it comparable then, Jasmin, to maybe having children? Because you've got 2 children as well, haven't you? After you have a baby, you suddenly think, it wasn't that bad.
Yeah, it's similar. There were definitely similarities as well. And I guess when you have a baby, there's this, the baby comes out and then it's just like, thank goodness that's over. And then there's a kind of joy as well. So yeah, there were definitely similarities. I could definitely draw parallels between the two.
Fantastic. I mean, they must be so proud of you because, your husband, Conrad, he runs as well, doesn't he? What was the support like from friends and family?
Yeah, well, Conrad was obviously there with me. He was crewing me, and I definitely couldn't have done it without him. Like, it makes such a difference having someone who knows you inside out for that kind of interlupal period, even if you're only there for a second. And it was wonderful to go there with him. He's been there. He's come with me for the last 3 years in a row. So he was like a huge part of it. And also all the kind of sacrifices I guess he's made at home in terms of, the mornings with the kids and things when I was out running. And I'm so hugely grateful to him. But also my parents who were looking after the children when we were away, and Conrad's parents who looked after them at other times for other races, and just friends and my family set up a couple of mini Barkleys for me in practice in I think 2 or 3 in the last few years, and so that we've had a lot of fun doing those, but they've also been kind of great training for that kind of element of picking pages out of books in the wilderness, in the wild. So yeah, I think this is like definitely a kind of team effort, and I'm really grateful for all the support I've had.
I mean, the dedication obviously has to come from within. Like you said, it has to come from yourself, but amazing how much support you need as well from those around you, isn't it, really?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There's no way that, I'm really conscious of the fact that I've got an incredible support network, and yeah, I'm really grateful for those people in my life.
Jasmin, what was different about this year? You've tried the Barkleys, as you've said before. I know that Damien Hall, who's also been on this podcast, he's run it with you, ran it last year, and he said you fell asleep and you came and woke him up, and you almost made it, but not quite. What made it happen this year? What did you do differently? Was there anything you did differently?
I think, to be honest, I think it was more of a combination of things. It wasn't like one key thing. The In terms of navigation, 2 years worth of experience was like a huge benefit for me going into this year. I just felt more confident about the park. It felt less intimidating, sort of felt a bit more at home. And crucially, I'd sort of made a lot of the mistakes in both directions, just having run on my own and through several loops in the previous 2 years. So this year I was kind of better at spotting that I was about to make a mistake and kind of better at correcting it early. So navigationally, I just felt more confident, but also I just felt good energy wise and better than I have done for the last couple of years. I'd had this sort of tiredness I wasn't quite shaking off, and then kind of the end of 2023 that went away. So I suddenly sort of felt really good. And then training wise, I think I did more climb. Certainly did. I was doing kind of some double days with double sessions with a kind of stair climb in the evening as well, and then I did quite a lot of reps on finding the steepest hill and going for several hours doing reps on the longer runs. So I think that element was good as well. Like I was kind of well prepared for what I was going to face there. So it was a combination of things, and then the weather. The weather was really good. It was very good last year as well, but we've had 2 years with really kind of exceptionally good weather. And I was aware going into Barkley this year, I felt quite confident about myself, but the big kind of key factor that I couldn't control was the weather. So yeah, I was just lucky that worked out for me, really.
It's almost like everything has to align, doesn't it, on that particular day? There are so many different things that could go wrong. And, they just all came together for you, didn't they? Which is fantastic. A lot of people have actually asked me to ask you questions about the Barkleys, Jasmin. So I'm going to just kind of throw a few out there if that's okay. One question is, would you describe the Barkley Marathons as a trail race, or is it more than that?
It's not a trail race, no. I mean, there's a little bit of trail, not very much. So most of it's just, if anything, it's more like a fell race, but with woods. A steep fell race. And by that I mean, like, most of it you're running off trail through on kind of pretty challenging terrain, and it's very steep up and down. So even in terms of the angle that you're running at, most trail races would be on trails that would be going on switchbacks, so you're going to and fro zigzags on the kind of steeper sections, whereas this is genuinely, it's much more like a fell race in that element. You'll just go straight up and straight down, but it's the terrain and it's the navigation and everything else as well. So I wouldn't really say it's a trail race, no.
And I noticed as well that you were quite scratched up by the end of it, weren't you? So you must have been running through, pretty awful kind of conditions in some respects, in terms of getting scratched by trees and branches, right?
Yeah, there's like this, there's the kind of, everybody sees the photos of, the kind of the section below the fire tower. I think that's what you see in lots of the media stuff. So that's quite brambly, but that wasn't, I think the new section this year was lots, I think everybody agreed that was particularly bad in terms of brambles. So they're quite big. I feel like they're bigger than standard blackberries in the UK. These sorts of gyres, and they grab at you and sort of you try and push through most of them, but then occasional ones will really get stuck, and then you have to kind of disentangle yourself from them. And yeah, it's always a kind of balance between wearing enough clothes to try and limit the kind of damage done by the briars and then not getting too hot. So that's always the challenge.
So much to think about. I thought this was a good one and pretty relevant to this podcast as well, in that, what do you eat? And that, I suppose that could be, what do you eat in preparation for the race? What do you eat during the race? And do you have a particular diet?
Yeah, so I guess like in recent years, so in recent years, I guess at home we've tried to move to a more plant-based diet. We're not a vegan as a family, but we definitely, don't. We buy very little meat, certainly no red meat. We eat some fish and some dairy, but personally, I'm kind of, when I'm eating without the family, lunches and breakfasts, I'm vegan for those meals. In terms of Barkley itself, did. I wasn't vegan there. I was just vegetarian. So I had a kind of a mixture of things. I had like cheese and pickle sandwiches. I had some frittata. I just basically took things that I knew I'd be able to eat because I felt that was the most important thing. So I took, what else did I have? I had some pizza. I had trail mix. I had some chocolate bars. I had sweets. Just had a few gels. And some hot cross buns and that sort of thing. I guess for me, the most important thing for Barkley was, for even if I was going to kind of break that those vegan intentions, it was more important for me to actually try and finish the race and not have to fly back there, because that's obviously the biggest environmental impact that I'm having when I'm doing that race. Giving myself the very best chance in my head of finishing by using the stuff that I knew from years of experience works.
Sure. And some people, Jasmin, might be quite surprised at how a lot of the foods that you've just listed there sound really unhealthy on a kind of a day-to-day basis, don't they? But is it much more important, therefore, to actually just get the calories in? It doesn't really matter so much when you're doing that kind of distance if you're packing in, junk calories.
Well, for the actual race, you just need to get calories in, whatever you can get in. So at the kind of in the interlunar period, I was eating porridge or rice pudding or pasta, drinking Coke, tea, coffee. But yeah, to clarify, like when we're at home, like I tend to have either nut butter or kind of on toast for breakfast, and then like a salad or soup for lunch. And then like we always make our food from scratch in the evening. So we have like a family meal that's lots of pulses, lots of kind of nuts, fruit, vegetables. So we I'd say we have a pretty healthy diet at home. It was just for the race, and I think that's completely irrelevant in terms of the grand picture there. It's just the case of getting the calories in.
Sure. Can you explain to us what a typical training week looked like, kind of in the weeks before the Barkleys?
Yeah, so I guess it's hard to say a typical training week because you're kind of building up, and you have your peak training weeks where you do more than, I guess that's the whole kind of premise, is that you sort of build up to your maximum point, and as I say, you have these kind of the hardest training weeks. But I guess what I tend to have, I always have Monday off as a complete rest day. I tend to do 3 strength sessions a week for half an hour, and I do that as an online class with Coach D, he has an online class specifically for runners. And then I, running wise, I guess tended to be doing one sort of hard, sort of either intervals or, hill rep type session, but basically more speed work. And that's sort of usually midweek. And then slightly longer run, but still sort of maybe 10 to 12 miles at the sort of peak of training on a Thursday. And then just kind of standard, maybe 6 to 8 miles on the Tuesday and the Friday, and then on the Saturday and the Sunday, those would be kind of my longer runs. So on a Saturday, even at the kind of maximum, it was probably about 25 miles. But for Barkley, I was doing a lot of ascent, so I think my longest runs had sort of between 4,000 and 4,700 meters of ascent were kind of my longest. Biggest ascents in kind of sessions before Barkley, and then on Sunday would be another long run, but not quite as big as that. So I think the kind of maximum weeks I was doing were about 80 to 90 miles and about 11, maybe 12,000 meters of ascent in terms of the kind of weeks before Barkley.
That's a lot to pack into a week, especially if you're working as well, which of course you are, aren't you? Do you find it just exhausting, like going into a race like this and then obviously coming out the other end?
No, I mean, to be honest, I really enjoy the training. It's nice I'm a bit nostalgic for it now, because I guess, that bit's over, and I'm kind of already looking forward a little bit to the next kind of aim and getting stuck in like that, because it's nice to be focused and not to, to have just, quietly going through the winter with your aim and getting on with it and feeling that fitness starting to come. And that's kind of exciting. And there's a real sort of warm feeling when you start to feel like you can run up a hill, and it starts to feel easy, that feeling of flow. So no, I wouldn't say there was exhaustion, because I guess if you were exhausted going into it, then probably something's gone wrong. So
good point.
and I would say that I tried to do, like, this year was quite well timed, is that February half term was really well timed. So I actually did my biggest training week then, and we were away up north, sort of not far from Callander in Scotland. So we did, I just had more time to get out on the hills, and it meant slightly, I didn't have to get up quite as early to fit it in around work. So I try to do that if I've got these big events, if possible, try to kind of time things so that I maybe get to do my biggest weeks or week of training during the period when we might be on annual leave, because I find that really helpful for recovery.
Again, things all aligning for you, I suppose. This is a good question. When things are hurting a lot, what do you remind yourself? What's your mantra and what's your why for a race like this?
I mean, I don't feel like I had like a why. I just wanted to do it. I like it. I just really wanted to do it.
That's a why. That is definitely a why, Jasmin.
I wanted to prove it to myself. So I mean, it's just been something that I felt like I could do it. I wanted to prove it, and to be honest, it was more to prove it to myself than anybody else externally. It was just an intrinsic desire to show it could be done, because I felt like it could. I believed it was possible, and I guess wanted to disprove the people that also would say that a woman couldn't finish it. So, but the main thing was for myself and to prove it. In terms of what I think about when it gets really hard, I think there were some moments when I was having a particularly really bad patch where I tried to think of something nice, and then I thought about my kids back at home, thought about kind of cuddling with them, and I try not to kind of dwell on that for too long, because you need to sort of stay focused and stay moving forwards, and everything has to be kind of geared towards getting to the end of that loop as quickly as possible. So it does better not to kind of dwell on other things too much, and instead to concentrate on where you're going and what you're doing next, if you can.
It's interesting that you said you do it for you, which is amazing, but also you just mentioned there that you wanted to show that women can do this, and women across the world are all going, yes, Jasmin, we're so proud of you and what you've achieved. One person has asked the question: what can race directors for ultras do to encourage greater female participation? Is there anything that race directors can consider, in your opinion?
Yes, I mean, I'm not the best person to talk about this, because there's people that kind of make this, that are kind of experts on this. So I just say kind of personally some thoughts of mine, but as I say, this is just opinion or thoughts of mine. I think sometimes, interestingly, I think sometimes women are put off, especially the kind of races that talk about being the toughest or most dangerous or most extreme races. And so I think somehow kind of maybe even just a kind of stepwise encouraging. So it might be that races could have initially a shorter option as well, and that women could kind of build up, because I think women maybe tend to be less kind of gung-ho about, often they're very well prepared when they do actually sign up for a race, but they're less willing to kind of give it a go if they don't feel so well prepared. So maybe that kind of stepwise having a slightly shorter race for them to kind of build up for that. In terms of confidence, as I say, it's not that I think they wouldn't be able to do it, it's more kind of confidence wise. But then there's other things like obviously having the option of deferral for pregnancy and having children. So I think that's like an absolute must. I think and then kind of facilities, in terms of things like toilets and changing facilities and so on. So those would kind of be some thoughts that have particularly the kind of pregnancy and deferral. From my point of view, I've definitely kind of, for example, UTMB were quite late with that, but now they're very good, I think. So there's definitely been changes in the last few years in terms of events and how they deal with these things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the topic of female participation in sport is definitely starting to be listened to, isn't it? And race directors are definitely moving in the right direction, I would say. One other question here from listeners, Jasmin, is Were you ever in doubt that you'd finish the Barkley Marathons?
I mean, do you mean in terms of this year? I mean, I guess I was never sure that it was possible, but I did believe it. I could do it. I guess the biggest moment of doubt probably came in the last kilometre when I suddenly realised how tight it was going to be, and I knew I was just so tired and I was so desperate to stop, and then it was essentially running kind of flat, straight, slightly uphill, and then the final bit was more uphill. And I knew that I was actually going to have to run it because I didn't have enough time to do any walking, and that was really hard. So I think, to be honest, that was like almost certainly in the last loop. I despite the fact that lots of people kind of wrote me off or maybe thought it was very unlikely I would finish based on my timings, I thought I could finish, but it wasn't until the last sort of kilometre that I was suddenly not sure anymore. So yeah. I think deep down I felt that it was possible from the moment I went to Barkley for the first time and saw what it was like. Before that I didn't know, but once I'd been there I thought it was possible.
When you finished this year, did you know immediately that you'd made it? Or was there a moment where you thought, I don't know, because you were so close to the cutoff point, did you have a really clear idea in your head that you were going to make it to that gate, or were you a little bit ambiguous?
I don't know. I've been asked this, and I'm not actually not sure. Like I was pretty out of it, to be honest. I think I must have known I'd made it just because of the way everybody was behaving around me. I think probably my kind of I managed to look at my watch kind of at the base of the hill, and I had a rough idea of how many minutes I had to get up. And given the way that people were cheering all the way up the hill and all the way to the gate, I guess I thought I'd done it. And then nobody said, you haven't done it. So, but I can't honestly say a moment when I was like absolutely sure that I had done it. And you're right, I didn't know the exact time when I finished. And it wasn't till a little while later. So, yeah.
It must have felt, I would say, I can only imagine, euphoric for you when you knew that you'd done it. Was it a bit like that, or were you just so out of it that actually you didn't really care?
No, I was incredibly happy. Yeah, I was incredibly happy. It was wonderful. The atmosphere there was incredible. People were so happy as well. Everybody seemed so happy. So it felt like a kind of shared joy. And there was definitely an element of relief that I was sitting down and not have to go anywhere anymore. But yeah, it was an incredible feeling. It's going to be hard to match that sort of. I don't know if I'll ever match that in terms of the end of a race in my life again.
What's wonderful is you said about that shared joy there, and I'm pretty certain that everybody at home that was watching you had that feeling of euphoria as well, because it was so close and we were just all rooting for you so deeply, and to just watch that moment. Well, you can see why people were in tears. It was so moving, and it was such a huge deal for the sport as well. Do you think that it's really put fell running, trail running, and long distance more in the spotlight now?
I do think. I think it was interesting because I think it sort of broke through. In terms of media, I think it broke out of the kind of standard circles that these sorts of stories would, basically broke out of the kind of sport, even trail running media, it broke out of that, and it broke out of kind of mainstream sport media into kind of just normal news and people talking about it. And I think just in terms of participation in sport and things, I've had lots of messages from people saying that they've been inspired, and for me that's incredible. That's so sort of so wonderful to hear. Just people talking about being inspired to get out and maybe do their park run or just go for a run with their kid, or that's a wonderful thing. So I do think it's got people talking about it, just people that maybe didn't really have anything to do or didn't really know anything about kind of trail running before are talking about that and about getting out and being active, really, which is wonderful.
Well, you're not only inspiring people with your running, Jasmin, you're also inspiring people with your green ethics as well, because you're co-founder of the Green Runners as well, aren't you? Which encourages other runners to really think more responsibly about how they run, how they move, how they kit up. What was it that kind of drove you to look into setting that up?
Yeah, I think it was kind of I guess a group of runners naturally came together. I think it was around the time of COP26, and maybe feeling like we wanted more action, wanted to be able to do something more, and starting at our own community, the running community, seemed like, a really good positive thing that we could do. And from personal point of view, I guess around that time I was maybe feeling that I was aware that I had this sort of platform in terms of social media, kind of public profile, just from things like the Spine, and then having to, started my attempts at Barkley. And I really wanted to use that in some positive way, that for a cause that I was passionate about, because I don't naturally feel like completely comfortable about social media. I find it, it gives me a bit of anxiety, and I don't, kind of naturally like spending a lot of time doing social media things. So I thought, if I'm going to use that public profile and that platform that I have for something, let it be for something I really believe, a cause I believe in, rather than, for example, being an ambassador for any kind of brand of kit or product. So that's when I thought that, if I could use my platform to support something with a positive kind of green angle, then that would be a fantastic thing. So for me, that was a real sort of incentive to try and be involved and try and push the kind of green runner idea. So it worked really well. So now I feel that at least I have something that I can stand up for and be an ambassador for, representative of, that I feel passionately about.
And for the Green Runners, just for those who don't know, if you sign up to become a member, you are asked to make a pledge, aren't you, Jasmin? So what's your pledge for this year?
So I guess my pledge is, so you're absolutely right, and the kind of key thing is acting on the pledge rather than anything else. So I feel quite passionately that regardless of actually whether you become a Green Runner member or not, it's making that pledge internally to yourself and actually acting on it. That's the kind of biggest measure of any success that the Green Runners have, I think, is the action itself. The Green Runners is based around the 4 pillars, thinking about how you move, how you kit up, how you fuel, and how you speak out. So for me, my pledges have been, in terms of moving, we know that the biggest component of the carbon footprint of an event of most events is the travel to those events. So for me, I've kind of opted to try and travel much less to events. I do much less racing now. And when I do travel to races, I try to go avoid flying. So, for example, the World Championships last year in Austria, I traveled to by train. And so on. So that was my kind of travel pledge, and I did feel quite a dilemma about actually going to Barkley, and I'm glad that I've managed to finish it, because I don't have to face that dilemma again next year. But that was the only flight that I for any sort of race event I did last year, and the years before that as well. So so that was my travel. My fueling, I've kind of mentioned. I'm pretty much vegan when I'm not eating with family members. And one big change I actually made at home was switching to oat milk rather than dairy milk, and now I actually much prefer it. So that's kind of drastically reduced, I think, the amount of milk that we were using as a family. And then in terms of, and I should mention that running food, I actually just use normal food when I'm kind of out training and things, rather than using a lot of kind of packaged designed running pouches,
like gels and things.
Gels, which are, that avoids you needing any sort of wrapper or anything. If you just take a sandwich, peanut butter sandwich, then you could just take it, you can wrap it in one of those reusable cloth things. So that's my fueling. And then in terms of kitting up, so I don't run for any kind of brand anymore, so I've just been using the same kit for the last few years really, and just repairing it. So repairing, reusing, recycling. I use a friend's running pack for Barkley, borrowed it last year and this year again, because I didn't have quite the right size pack, and I didn't want to buy a pack just for that particular race. So that sort of thing. And then I actually repaired my shoes a bit before Barkley as well. So it's definitely possible to do that, and you don't need the newest kit to do well in these things. And then finally, speaking out. So I guess I'm trying to speak out about the Green Runners. That's a large reason that I'm doing the interviews post Barkleys, to try and speak out about it and kind of get that message heard. And I think that's honestly really the most important of the 4 pillars is thinking how we can collectively speak out to influence, influence in meaningful change on a policy level, because ultimately we can all kind of have our own personal responsibility, but what we need is for kind of the big game-changing kind of moments will be when the decision makers that can influence policy, when they truly want to address climate change as well. So that's, I think, speaking out is the most important of the 4 pillars.
And like you said, it's about influencing change with the bigger organisations, isn't it? The race organisers, the race directors, and above. We talked briefly about how they could, improve female participation, but how can they improve green credentials in running generally? What do you think are the top things that races can think about?
Yeah, so again, this is actually something that the Green Runners, I think, are offering advice on. We've certainly been preparing lots of materials. So again, I'm not the expert, so I'd probably direct race organisers to look at the greenrunners.com online. So we are going to kind of, if we've not got it there already, we'll have some material on that. But things that race organisers can do, easy things, thinking about the travel of participants, so encouraging public transport. So that might even be moving their race time to suit, the first train in the morning, putting on a minibus from the station, encouraging runners to bring their own cups and bottles, and not having, disposable plastic bottles or cups. Obviously having, plant-based food, trying to food and water available. Having, I would encourage race organisers, if possible, to have a kit repair stand, as well as, often you'll get lots of, you might get kind of kit sales events, but I would argue, why in that case, why don't you have a kit repair stand or some sort of facility to allow for kit swaps or secondhand sales of kits, so that sort of thing. So these are all things that race organisers can start to think about going forward.
Do you find yourself a little bit torn when, for example, you said about the Barkley Marathons and, you had to fly there, but you really wanted to do that race? Are there other times when you've thought, oh, I really want to go, I really want to do that, but actually I'm going to, stand firm and I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to participate because I don't agree with either the distance that it is or maybe the ethos of the race itself. Have you come across that a few times?
Yeah, and that's happened a lot, and it's happening a huge amount now. So I get emails from all these fantastic places that I would love to go to, like race organisers saying, we'll pay for your travel, we'll pay for your race fee, we'll pay for you to even bring the family to race this race, which I can't, it's hard to fathom it. But places like Australia and Mexico and places that I would love to visit. So I've said no to lots of people. And it's mainly based on those kind of environmental concerns that I have, because I would love to see all these places. So I think really for me, I've tried to kind of really strip back and say, is this something that you absolutely can't do anywhere else? Is it something that you're really passionate about, that you really, really want in terms of going to a race? And Barkley was something kind of unique that I couldn't recreate in any other way. I couldn't get that kind of challenge. And I also knew that if I did manage to pull it off, I would have a bigger platform to speak about the Green Runners and about, I guess, things I'm passionate about. So it was kind of a trade-off. But that's why I wouldn't kind of now use that publicity to try and, to fly all over the world every other week, which certainly at the moment seems like it would be a possibility if I wanted to take that up. So, yeah.
I mean, it takes quite a strong mindset as well, doesn't it, Jasmin? Because obviously you've been offered, these opportunities to fly to far-flung places all over the world. But it's not just you that's going to be offered these, really tempting, exciting race opportunities. There's going to be lots of other people that are being offered them, and maybe you're saying yes. Is it really, in your mind, about this collective movement? Do you think more people just have to, speak using their feet, literally, and saying, no, actually, we're not going to hop on a plane, or we're not going to take part in this because we don't agree with, big oil or whoever's backing the sport? It takes a louder voice, doesn't it? It takes more than one person to make these changes.
Yeah, I do think it's kind of a collective responsibility. I would say, like, I think one of the important things is that people sometimes, I think people have said to me that they're maybe scared to join the Green Runners or feel that they're not good enough or in some way because they feel that they're imperfect. And the first thing I would really like to stress is that, none of us are perfect. And, as I say, I flew to Barkley and it was not like we were expecting anyone to be perfect. But I think trying to cut down and trying to be, have a kind of appreciation of the impact of what we're doing as runners and traveling to events is the key thing. So even if you're traveling multiple times a year, if you cut down and travel once, then that's already a fantastic improvement. So I do think it's collective responsibility, but it's incredible how I think if we act together and pull together, then the impact that we can have is quite remarkable. So just let's take the petition that we placed to try and recently get the UTMB to kind of rethink their the Dacia sponsoring the being the headline sponsor for the UTMB, and it was kind of really heartening how many runners got behind that and spoke out and signed that petition, and it certainly did generate discussions with them, and I'm positively, I feel positively that will, because they're such kind of leaders in the field, will impact policy decision for other race organisers and hopefully maybe them as well, going in future years. So I think collectively we do have great power, because ultimately race organisers, they rely on us. We're the consumers. So we have the ability to determine how the future of our sport is going to be shaped. So I think then it's down to us, really.
Absolutely. And I know one of the Green Runners members very recently ran the Brighton 10K dressed as a plastic water bottle in opposition of the Buxton sponsorship of the marathon, where, they're freely handing out and encouraging, really, people to take single-use plastic bottles and then to just chuck them on the floor when they finish with them. That's his real pet hate. Is there a real, pet peeve that you have that races are still doing that you just can't abide by?
I mean, I guess that sort of thing, that would definitely be one of them. I guess.
It feels quite archaic, doesn't it? Like, we've moved on from there. We've got reusable cups. Let's use them.
Yeah, exactly. So that's, I think, kind of one of the key things. And then also, I guess I'm opposed to giving out lots of free things that people don't want in goodie bags. And the same kind of applies to getting T-shirts at races. I think, by all means, if somebody really wants a T-shirt, then have that as an option. But then, in that case, also maybe have them pay some extra for the T-shirt, or have the option of getting plant a tree instead, type thing. So it's not like everybody's going to be getting a T-shirt, even if they don't want it. And similarly for kind of goodie bags full of lots of stuff that people don't want or don't need, because a lot of that's going to end up in landfill, and it just seems like a huge waste. So I think I love fell races because they're so like low key and basic and simple, and then you get your squash from the kind of canister afterwards, and your piece of cake, and there's none of this kind of stuff involved. So that's what I think we should try to get back to in trail running as well.
And it's really taking you back to nature, isn't it, as well? You're just kind of really immersed in it, which is, I think, why a lot of people take up the sport in the first place, because they just kind of want to get away from the noise of everyday life and into nature. So I guess it's really important not to then muddy it with, free T-shirts and medals and bottles of water and stuff. It's a bit of solace, isn't it? What got you into fell running? Was it just that getting away from it all, or was it something else?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of came into it quite naturally, because I just always done a lot of hiking, even as a child, and then kind of a teenager in my early 20s. And I just loved being in the hills and mountains, and somehow fell racing ended up just being a kind of natural transition from walking in the hills. It was just a way to get there more quickly, and it meant I could go, for an hour running the hills before work. And so it was kind of a way of getting into the hills every day, despite then having a kind of day job and like a full-time job. The kind of catalyst was a friend at work when I was working my first job in Glossop, saying, did I want to go along to a local fell race? And I went along, and I really loved it. I was just thrilled. There was like the adrenaline, I was so out of breath and so kind of fell over so many times, but I just thought this is like insanely fun, and these people are wonderful. So I really kind of got the bug that day just from that one. It was like love at first sight.
Did you always know you were really good as well, or did that come later?
No, but I mean, I still don't think I'm that good. It depends on what
Incredible.
I'm very good at being like stubborn and persisting, but I'm not the fastest. Let's in a short race, I'd be left way behind the kind of speedy youngsters. So, I think I realized it wasn't that long before I realized I like doing longer things and kind of more challenging terrain. That's where I seem to find my niche. But no, at the start, especially because I was running shorter things when I kind of first started, I was certainly not at the front. I was somewhere, again, maybe in the top half, but I wasn't winning the races right from the start.
Gosh, for Jasmin Paris to say, "Oh, I don't think I'm that good," is it's fantastic. You are. You're pretty good, Jasmin. I'm gonna tell you now in case nobody else has mentioned it to you. Now you've come back from the Barkley Marathons. How does it work? Do you kind of sit down, take stock, decide what you're going to do next, or is it like a nice break for you now with the family?
Yeah. I sort of already know some things that I'm going to do in May, doing the Scottish Highlands Peaks race and the Jura Fell race. And they're just things that I just really love and, that have been in the calendar for a while. And then I'm doing the Tour de Géant in September as the next kind of big challenge. But it's nice. Yeah, it's nice to have a bit of time. It's nice. It's been nice the last few weeks to not be getting up every day at 5 a.m. to train, to have a few more kind of mornings where I can cuddle with the kids in bed a bit longer type thing, and maybe have a normal breakfast that the kind of, I guess, normal people have before they leave the house rather than doing everything on the fly. But I'm getting to the point where I'm excited now to get back into doing a bit more running and then start training again. So it's a bit of both really. It's been nice to have a bit more time with the family.
And when does that real hard training start back up again? Is that soon?
I don't know. I've just left it kind of quite open at the moment. I guess I'll want to kind of do that for a few months before the Tour de Géant, but I think probably probably even till after Jura I'll just kind of run what feels good and then probably start training sometime after that, June time maybe.
Thousands of people have been inspired by you, Jasmin. If people are wanting to kind of take up the sport, maybe they've never tried it before, or maybe they kind of dabble but want to try longer distances, what's the kind of the one bit of advice you could give to somebody looking to start fell running?
It's difficult to give one single piece of advice. I guess I'd say go for it. Don't hold back. It's super, super friendly community, fell running community, very welcoming. It's very kind of, there's no egos. Everybody's kind of very equal. And don't worry about being slow, because everybody, even the fastest people, walk some of the hills. And lots of people walk all the hills. So don't be nervous about that. I'd say if you are thinking about it, then, some of those local short races are a great way to meet the community. Sometimes in the summer they'll be at midweek as well. They're very doable, kind of short, over with quick, and then I'd say join a club, because that's the way that you're going to get out on this. That's kind of, I guess, my single piece of advice is join a club and get out and meet some people, and you'll have company to go on some runs in the hills over winter. That's great to kind of have some training partners, give you some confidence with navigation and getting out there. And then have some, it's nice to have a club to run for at races. It kind of adds an additional social element to it that's great fun. Those would be the kind of things to suggest.
Great advice, and also to just advise people to go and check out the Green Runners as well, really.
I didn't realise that was kind of an element of the question specifically for fell running, but absolutely, go and check out the Green Runners.
Just overall running, I think, isn't it? Just go and check them out. Jasmin, it's been absolutely fantastic chatting to you. I know you're hugely busy, and I know now you kind of want to just kick back, spend some time with the family before you start training again. So I really thank you so much for your time today. I'm really excited to see what you do in the future as well. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks very much for the chat.
Thanks so much for listening, and don't forget to leave a review for the Vegan Fitness Runner podcast. Please subscribe if you don't want to miss an episode, and remember you can find out more about all my guests and further information on all the topics covered over on the website veganfitnessrunner.com. Thanks again, and bye for now.